Welcome to another maintenance blog. It's a bit of a long one this week, so let's get down to it straight away. I need to install the Wakespeed 500. This basically regulates the alternator to make sure that it doesn't melt basically when it's trying to charge the lithium batteries, because lithium batteries have a lot of demand and the old style alternators aren't really designed to kind of just keep pumping an endless supply of energy into that. Usually as the AGMs start to become fully charged, the resistance comes a lot higher, which means that the alternator is not physically capable of putting in that energy, so it basically slows down and cools down. That doesn't happen with lithium batteries. They just keep taking as much energy as the alternator will give it, and eventually the alternator just basically gives up. It's going to take me a while to get the WS500 installed. It came with a harness, but unfortunately the harness didn't have the heat sensor on, so I'm getting that brought out by a fellow cruiser from the States. I'm having to basically ship it to his address because he's coming flying out to Tahiti very soon, so that was the quickest and easiest way to get it over here without it getting caught up in customs. So there's still a lot of work to do before I can get it in there. Battleborn have actually bought Wakespeed out now, so it is actually a Battleborn product, so that's good. That means I've got a one-stop shop for getting any technical support. You have to pre-program it for your type of batteries, and then there are a lot of cables to connect up. There's two types of these harnesses. There's the positive and the negative, depending on what your alternator is. I sent my pictures to Battleborn and they sent me the positive, so I'm presuming they know what they're talking about. So these are the instructions for the harness that came with it, which is really cool. It's really simple to understand. As you can see, colour coordinated and big fat numbers for even the uninitiated to understand. And then on the back, the dip switch settings, which are the kind of the basic settings for what batteries you've got, but you can actually program it by downloading the configuration software from the Wakespeed website. Now there's a lot more involved installing this than I ever imagined. You've basically got 3 looms of cables going to different parts of the boat. So it's a bit overwhelming, but I guess I've just got to do it step by step. So first of all, I've got to do the firmware update, then the configuration, and then I've got to start wiring it up. It's going to take me some time to kind of slowly go through all the information to be able to do that. Let's see how it goes. Even though they say it's an easy install, reading it seems quite overwhelming. So I'm going to go through it step by step. Two things I've noticed straight away is as I've opened it up, I've got the old style USB connector, whereas on the latest documentation it says you need a micro one. Luckily I've got an old printer on board with the old style USB connector there, so I have the cable. The second thing is the software is only available for Windows. It's not available for Mac OS. Luckily I've sort of had to dig through the kids' cupboard and I found an old PC. I don't think I can get in line with this, so what I'm going to have to do is download any configuration software, any firmware updates on the Mac, and then I'm going to have to transfer it here somehow. So first of all, I've downloaded the configuration utility guide. It always worries me when you see sort of these DOS prompt commands. Let's start at the beginning and work through. So the quickest way to do the settings here is to follow the dip switch settings, which comes with the WS500, or it can be downloaded off the Wakespeed website. Here you can see the dip switches here, and then there's the old style USB plug there, and then the reset button here. So I think the more recent models have got the micro USB plugs, but this is one of the older models. You can configure the WS500 via the USB connection with the software, but the simplest and easiest way is to do it with the dip switches. But there's a more extensive level of configurability via the USB connection to a PC-based configuration software. So that's as easy as that. To do this, download the drivers and the firmware updates from the Wakespeed website. As Battleborn now own Wakespeed, this might move to the Battleborn website. You'll also need to download the configuration software for your particular batteries, and in my case it was the Battleborns. Once downloaded, extract the zip files to the desktop. There's the Battleborn configuration. So we've attached the cable, press any key to continue. Then, making sure you have the USB cable connected, load the firmware and configuration software, and then just follow the instructions. Just basically updated everything. So I'm just reading from the configuration utility guide. To start the firmware upgrade, press and hold the reset button for 5 seconds. There's the reset button in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A new window will open on the desktop, providing step-by-step configuration. Just clearing out the old configuration, putting in the new. All done. Reset the regulator. Thank you for using. Verify the update is complete without errors, and once done, press continue. Well, I don't know way of verifying it, so I'll just press to continue, and that's it. It was actually quite easy. Figuring out what to do was hard, but actually doing it was quite easy. So that's that done. So I've been wondering where to mount the alternator regulator. I think the best place is on this bulkhead. So I've already installed the alternator protection device. So I think I'll mount the regulator here, just above it. The insulation is quite thick, so I'm going to have to make a piece of ply to mount on the bulkhead so I can make it stand proud of that insulation. The harness will go down there and then into the alternator here. So I made this wood out of a bit of ply. So it's just to basically mount the WS500. It's to just bring it proud a little bit of the insulation here. So the harness has 3 tails. It's got one going to the alternator, one to the batteries, and then one to the ignition switch. So the alternator one, the length is fine, it'll go to the alternator okay, but obviously these need extending. So I'm just thinking about putting a junction box somewhere.
Race is not part of the definition of Marwise permitted because of the race of the particular. Marx was already a communist. To the much larger communist league. The Second Congress of the League was held in late November. Marx and Engels dominated at the close of historical materialism.
So I'm off into town again to try and find some 1.5mm squared wire for the alternator, and I've tried the local shops but nobody has it, so I've been told there's a shop in town that might. I've just got to navigate the public transport system on Tahiti, which isn't easy, and find this shop. Unfortunately half the stuff is out of stock, so I couldn't get what I wanted, so but what I'll do is I'll put some junction boxes in place and replace it at a later date if I need to. So I've just rang a Renker and she's coming to pick me up on shore, but it's a bit gusty today, so it'll be a bit tricky getting on the dinghy.
Funding is really important. Could you?
Of course, doing a job like this with the family around is a bit of a challenge, and Dad can get a bit grumpy sometimes. Darry, put that away now.
Okay.
So being in Tahiti, we can't get hold of any shielded tinned 6-core 16 AUG or 1.5mm cable. The only thing I've been able to get hold of is some 3-core grey domestic cable. So I've ran 2 lengths through, but I've sort of differentiated them by putting periodically some coloured tape on it. I'll wire it in a way that it's replaceable if I need to kind of do it at a future date, but you've got to work with what you've got when you're travelling. So the cable run for this is really tricky. You've got to put your arm right inside and then pull it through behind some foam insulation. This cable run is going to go down here, down there beside the engine, and up to the WS500 over there. So I've got mixed feelings about tinning the ends of wires. On the one hand, it stops any corrosion, which is like the main source of problems in electric circuits. But on the other hand, it stops the joint from crushing down and getting a better grip in the terminals. So sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I haven't got any sort of fixed policy on that. So part of the reason I mounted on the bulkhead there and not further up is so I've got a good line of sight from when I lift the engine bay lid. I can see down here to see if there's any warning lights. It's very handy for quick inspection. So I've got the battery harness here, and it's the other side of that long run that I've done. I want to finish off with the correct coloured wires because I want it to match the circuit diagram, so any owners that come along after me can easily match it up with the wiring diagram. I'm going to prefix it into the junction box, and then I'm going to put the extensions in the junction box in the battery bank. And of course the other thing I need to do is fit a 3 amp fuse on the live wire there. The final piece in the jigsaw, ATK temperature sensor. So these basically fit on here. So they're adapters, and there is a temperature sensor in the end of there. And so now I've got to fit those on there like that. And one goes on the alternator and one goes on one of the batteries. I've left plenty of spare there, about half a metre really. So I need to put some lugs on the end of the wire. I've got hundreds of lugs, but not the right ones, obviously. Arenga's taken the dinghy, so I can't get ashore, and even if I could, I'll probably spend hours looking around the challenges and they wouldn't have the right thing anyway. So South Pacific, you've always got to make do with what you've got. So I've got some lugs that I can modify. I can double over the wires to get the right thickness, and I can drill out the holes slightly. I only need 2 more millimeters to make the 8 millimeters 10 millimeter. So that's what we'll have to do. A great start. I've got the 2 black heat sensors on the side there, and the blue one, so that's brown and green. I've matched the colours with the junction box near the WS500, and that's the red, the red blue goes to the purple. I feel like one of those films where they dismantling the bomb. Cut the blue one! No! Cut the red one. So the red brown goes into the grey. Secure those chock blocks in place. Okay, I'll just check it with the multimeter after this. I think I'll leave that for tomorrow. So I've got the V8 smart dongle on one of the batteries as a heat sensor, so I'm going to set the WS500 on a different one. here we have the temperature sensor, purple on the battery side of the shunt, grey positive side of the shunt, stripy black on the negative bus bar, red stripy on the positive bus bar, the fuse in the positive side as well. So when I attach the Wakespeed, the purple and the grey wires here, I attach them to the terminals here, and this apparently is the high current shunt, and what I should have done is attach it to the low current shunt screws up here on either side. So I've removed those, but obviously I need to replace the terminals on the end of here now, and then awkwardly try and remove those screws and fit these ones instead. So I don't use this flexi extension very often, but when you need it, it is fantastic. Right, it's got a washer in there as well, which is bound to go missing if I don't get it off right. Got it. Luckily I left quite a long tail on that.
Battery.
As it is possible. So once the batteries were wired up, it was then time to turn to the more complex job of wiring up the alternator, which unfortunately meant removing it and hacking into the internal regulator. So I need to take the regulator off this alternator. Black wire here, brown wire this side, and then a yellow one going here. I can't get it off because of these wires here, so I'm going to have to take the whole thing off. Spade connector there and a spade connector there. Guessing that's the bushes. I can find actually. As with most parts of this install, I'm indebted to Dean Gillies for all of his help and diagrams. I'm just going to give these terminals a little bit of a clean with some 1200 grit. This spade terminal here is connected to this stud, but this one is not. It's actually connected to the D1 stud down here. So these are separate and these are together, which means when the regulator is attached, this brown wire is connected to the brown wire that comes off here. These two are connected. The B negatives are connected. The B positives are not connected. DW is connected down here. Looking at all these connections and wires, it seems on the surface of it complicated. It's actually quite simple. The only things I need to splice is the yellow wire here, and I need to split that off to go to the WS500, and then I need to put starter connection on the W here, and that needs to go off to the WS500 as well. Otherwise I think everything just remains the same. So it's just this and that. So I need to interrupt this one, take it outside the box and then return it, and that should be the most complicated bit. So the weather's been a bit changeable the last few days. We've had quite a bit of rain and a lot of wind. The breaker's been coming straight over the reef and we've had a lot of swell, so we haven't had the best night's sleep. But Arenka's taking the boys into town today to see the surf championship. That means I can carry on with modifying the alternator. Today what I need to do is break that yellow wire, which is the field wire I believe, and then splice it out, and I have to drill a hole through the regulator housing to bring that wire out, so then I can connect it to the WS500 harness. And that's pretty much it as far as modifications go, but it's a very thin, short wire that, so I can't make too many mistakes because I haven't got a lot of redundancy on that. I'll bring one off the other side as well to expose it, and then if for some reason something goes wrong with the WS500, or I just need to revert back to the old alternator regulator, I can just join those wires up and the alternator is back to what it was before. This is the field wire, which will be spliced into this field wire here, which is confusingly yellow, but luckily I've got a bit of redundancy on here, so what I can do is trim a little bit of that off and splice it on that so it's not confusing when it comes out. So I'll have a yellow coming off that and a blue coming off that, so I'll know to connect the blue wire from the harness to that blue wire that's poking out the top of the regulator. Point of no return. I think I'm going to be able to get my wire strippers in there. No. So it's exposed there. This just needs connecting to the brush there. The way I'm going to do this is I've got a solder connector here. The silver bit, the metal bit in the middle is the solder, and so what you do is you apply heat to it once you've joined the wires together, and that will actually solder them together. You put these in and then you heat it until that solder melts and binds the wires together, and then the heat shrink here forms a watertight seal. Trim it a little bit just so I'm going to fit it in there, because I need two of these in here and I'm going to kind of somehow squash them in place. I made myself a little diagram. Dean Gillies been helping me sort this out, so thanks Dean for that. So basically this field wire here, this blue field wire, connects to the brush wire there. It's very tight, so you can see the two wires are kind of spliced into each other there with the solder in the middle. Double check there is a connection. Fully connected up. So, okay, so that's the brush side, and the regulator side I'm going to just clip a little bit of this starter wire off, because even though completely separate colour, I want to make sure when it comes out the other end I don't confuse the two wires. So that is the field wire, and this is the field wire as well, but I want to connect this to the WS500, and I want to keep this as redundancy in case anything happens, and then at the other side I can just join these wires together and this regulator will just kind of kick back into place. I can split out a little bit, and then the prongs will hopefully sort of mesh together like that. That's it, perfect. I've got to thank Ant from Pavidus for giving me a shopping list of everything to get before we left Spain in Almerimar all those years ago. Wire strippers and heat shrink, connectors, and all these things that I didn't have a clue that I would need, but have been invaluable. So thanks Ant in Pavidus. Check out his website. He's got some really cool how-to videos on there, from all things from mechanical to electrical engineering on a boat. Now the tricky part of putting this all back in together and then trying to get an exit from here. Easiest way to exit them out will be through the top right here. So if I can drill two holes, I can get that one out, and then I can mount that all back in and they'll pop out there. One there. Okay, so second hole. So that'll actually go like that. So if I put the blue wire in the nearest one. There's the field wire. And there's the redundant field wire from the regulator. Inevitably, when you're coming back to this job in a few years' time, you'll want to know what you did. Those holes, by the way, that's 1.5mm or 16 AUG wire, so you can probably get away with the 3.5 drill in there. These actually look as though they're made of copper. So, moment of truth, will this fit? Put these back on these little lugs. That's the positive and the negative. That is the field wire, which I'm going to connect with a temporary connector for the time being, and that is the W wire. I'm still not quite sure what that one does, but that'll go on the W. And then finally there's the temperature sensor. It says you can put it on the negative terminal. That's the field wire, so I want to join those up temporarily. So I brought the two field wires out of the alternator here. The one I need is yellow and the other one is blue, so I could connect those up again if I need to. I don't know why they made hard to access. Okay, that's the field wire in place. W, which is a bit harder to reach. The last is the alternator temperature sensor. I think the only place I'm going to get it actually is in that stud there that's coming off the casing. I'm just going to sandwich it in between a couple of washers here. Piece in the jigsaw. So now I've just got to clip all these wires up and make sure they're neat. After all that, I put it all back together and I forgot to put the 15 amp fuse on the live. But it does mean I've got to take the live off again and splice this 15 amp fuse into the line, which is a bit of a pain. Of course, no job on a boat ever goes to plan, and when I tested it I was getting a lot of red LED advisory codes coming off the WS500. So after a lot of testing and a lot of emails to and from Battleborn and Wakespeed and my friend Dean Gillies, who happens to be in Greece at the moment, we've come to the conclusion that actually I have the wrong harness. I've got a P positive harness and what I need is a N negative harness. So as we're right in the heart of the Pacific Ocean at the moment, and it's virtually impossible to get things sent here in any realistic time frame, what I'm going to have to do is rejig the alternator. Rick from Wakespeed, I think he's in Seattle or somewhere, and Dean is in Greece and I'm in the Pacific, and Dean and Rick have been talking to each other about my alternator in the Pacific. And so they've come up with this thing of just to swap some wires around inside the alternator, so I can actually use the P-type harness rather than wait to get a negative harness swapped over. What I did last time, as you probably remember, is I took the wires out so I could connect them to bypass the external regulator, so I could connect up the internal regulator when I needed to, which came in handy when I couldn't get the Wakespeed to work. So now I've got to cut the lines to the brushes and expose those, bring those outside of the internal regulator, and then I need to disable all the other wires inside. Of course, if you do get the right harness, you won't have to do this bit, but these are the modifications I had to make to reverse the polarity of the alternator's wiring. That is the Sterling, the negative of the WS500, and that is the heat sensor. Finally the dark blue wire. I need to take this off now. We'll go into there. And the final loom was the ignition loom, and after a lot of discussion with Rick and Dean, it was decided to wire it on the D+ stud of the alternator and leave the other two wires. And that was it. The other thing was that the BMV battery monitor, the 712, slightly disconnected, and then it reset the maximum charge. So basically, when it was around about 75%, it just went down to 0 and then gave me a low state of charge warning. Clearly the batteries aren't discharged, but I had to reset that back to roughly what it was before, 75%. But I've got to be a bit careful now because that could be wrong, 10%, 20%. I'm not going to put the generator on for like 5 hours to try and get that back up to 100%. I'll have to wait till we get to shore power and do it on shore power. What I'd have to do is charge the batteries up to 28.6 volts, I think it is, which is when it should kick into float, and the batteries should be on 100%. Enough talking, let's do the final test. So that's it, that's the final bit of the whole lithium install. Can't believe we got it. It's taken months and months. I thought I'd do one blog on it, and it's turned out to be about 5 or 6 blogs, maybe even 7 by the time I've edited it all together. I'm so grateful to Dean Gillies and Rick from Wakespeed for helping me in the final troubleshooting phase. We're done.
Yay!
That's how much gratitude I get for all these months of work. Well, Arenka might not be all that enthusiastic, but if you did find this video useful and you're the type of person who likes to return a favour, you can now buy me a beer by using YouTube's new thanks button, which you'll find below this video. And mine's a Guinness. Battleborn has recently bought out Wakespeed, so for a one-stop shop for batteries, alternator protectors and regulators, check out the website links in the description below. So thanks for watching, and thanks in particular to our patrons who make all of these videos possible. We're a travelling family on a tight budget, so if these videos are helpful to you in any way, then you can contribute by following the links to PayPal or Patreon in the description below, or check out the crew shirts on our merch store.